lecture in our series, architecture class. And I'm delighted tonight to welcome Boštjan Vuga of SADAR+VUGA. Boštjan finished his studies in architecture in Ljubljana in 1992, and then he came to the AA, and that's where we met, where in fact I was also in the studio that year when you did your postgraduate study with Jeffrey Kipnis, and you must have finished in 1995. And it was unbelievably impressive to see Boštjan go back to Ljubljana and immediately, in 1996, win a competition with his partner Jurij for the Chamber of Commerce. I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, that's strange. And it was sort of a nicely stacked and shifted series of volumes that formed a new building for the Chamber of Commerce. And we had a sort of, I suppose after that time, having studied with Jeffrey Kipnis, both of us, after all the sort of smooth and bubbly surfaces, to see something that seemed to draw on a completely different form of originality was not only at once strange, it was also charming. What then ensued is, I think, something that will, at least I have the deepest admiration for. And that is basically for the two of them to have them the energy, the ability, of course also the luck in the end, to build up a substantial practice in Ljubljana that has, over the years, sort of stabilized itself, of course given financial sunny days and not so sunny days. It stabilized itself on a quite decent number of employees between 15 and 30. And Boštjan was generous enough to invite me to Ljubljana a few years ago. It was for a symposium that he hosted or co-hosted on Plečnik. And one of the highlights of that visit was actually going to see a couple of projects, spending time with Boštjan and others in Ljubljana, but also seeing a couple of projects, and I have to remember the names, I have to look at my list. There was the Condominium Trnovski, Pristan, which just simply is impressed me for its very, very elegant treatment of the massing and the facade. But not the least, a double villa, two villas at Cossese. This one was finished in 2008, the condominiums in 2002, 2004. And the two villas, they were sat rather sort of almost like cut off, isolated from the neighborhood in some ways, due to walls and also the walls of the house, walls of gardens and house. But inside opened up in a very, very finely articulated manner, where they seem to have been able to negotiate between the oblique and the orthogonal in really a very, very finely tuned fashion, without actually breaking up the interior in whatsoever. And I think this, the extent of my knowledge of your work, that and the ones that I have not visited but seen, it is a sort of finely tuned refinement to it, but one that always draws on a form of originality. But I can't help but I think it also has a little bit to do with simply having a healthy distance, being in Slovenia rather than, say, Amen or somewhere in Germany. And that I also think is a very admirable thing to do. I remember, I think you at one point, maybe it was when I visited you, you told me that with a substantial practice in Ljubljana at the time, the next ambition was to work internationally. Well, now they are, and with the stress and the delights of that. But I think this ability to both actually work locally and also, in particular, Boštjan's personal efforts and interest in being connected to a larger, certainly European, but I think also network that goes also to America, is very, very admirable. And I think it's to be seen in a sort of wonderful tension between that which your local address has fed into your work and that which your the network that you have nourished over all these years. Boštjan is currently a guest professor in Münster in architecture. Before that, he was a guest professor in Berlin. And this visit is one in a row string of visits to schools all over Europe that he conducts either taking part in symposia or speaking about his work as he will tonight. Boštjan, I'm delighted that you're here. Welcome.
Thank you. Wow, I would like to thank you, Johan, for this sort of very profound and very, I mean, touching for me introduction, you know. It's, I must say that if I just go back to the symposium you mentioned, you know, where we meet, like, I think it was like last time in Ljubljana, and I would say that with your contribution on Plečnik, which which is still sort of like very much present in my mind, where you describe his work as an opulent, if I'm not wrong, opulent contribution to the architecture in the 20th century. I mean, I think it's like super thorough and super actually like strong statements, especially for me, and I'm now kind of getting to the local context, since I've been taught, you know, that Plečnik's work was all based on, you know, kind of a very, very, very strong sacrificing and very strong, like, sort of almost like efforts, you know, to produce, like, kind of like a painful efforts to produce architecture. So it means, you know, that instead of kind of saying, okay, what we can do, what we can produce as architects can be also opulent, and not just opulent, but also fun, you know. So it's this lecture today, this presentation today, would actually show you a little bit of fun. We can also have it in our office, you know. Because we are in the, let's say, the academic frame, academic space of the school, I actually try to present our work with a topic, with let's say issue which is something what really interests me, and that's why this title is Production of Publicness. And I will show you, you know, later on through the lecture what I mean with the publicness and why the publicness is really important for our architecture production. But first, I will start with this slide, with these skits, which are playing here with this kind of, on this sort of weird or unusual sculpture fountain in the middle of this town square. So one would ask, you know, is that a memorial? Is that a memorial site? Is that a monument? Or is that a playground? And I would claim that this is a monument as a playground, or a playground as a monument. It's a monument which actually gets in a very informal use as a playground of these children who come and kind of appropriate this fountain as their playground. And by using this fountain as a playground, they actually change, or the space of the surrounding space of the square has been changed. It has become like a very public space. So in a way, the fountain, its architecture affects, you mean like the shape, the material, you know, the way how the water goes, invites the children to play, and by playing, you know, the fountain itself becomes like a catalytic object for transformation of this urban square into a very lively public place. This is what this lecture is about. How architecture can actually, how public character can actually be grafted into pure architecture elements, pure architecture projects. By the way, this is a project of our office developed and designed in 2000 for the millennium anniversary of the town where I come from. And this is the fountain, the millennium fountain of that place. So actually it's the monument to the 1000th anniversary of the town. And this is what I'm actually presenting tonight, kind of categorizing our work or production, part of the production of our office in the categories which are connected to the publicness. So the publicness is actually the public character of an architecture object. And as I put down here, it defines an object's catalytic strength to impact its physical and social context. It will become more clear during the presentation. So this is not only what we are doing in the office, but this is also what I'm interested in developing with students. And I'm showing here, you know, 4 examples of 4 studios at the TU Berlin, where we actually checked how publicness can actually be completely independent of the size of the object, of the of their scale, of the program, of their intent, of even like a context and budget, you know. So publicness is something which is sort of immanent to an architecture project when it is developed with that idea in the mind. So this was a seminar, we call it like placeholder, where the aim was designed pavilions, which would then become pavilions on the future construction sites in Berlin, which would become kind of which would foresee a future building. So invite the public to the construction site as a sort of like with an intention to present what the building would be constructed there. Then we move with a place activator seminar to Trieste, where we checked like different scale, like much larger object. What you see here is a regatta center. How these 7 objects in the port of Trieste would actually connect the sea and the city through the sort of like port which is now out of use. Further back to Berlin with a placemaker seminar, we checked a megastructure, like the catalytic strength of the megastructure to become like a generator of a publicness in the surrounding of the Stadtring Berlin. So you see like move from the pavilion to the pavilions to the megastructure. And finally, last year we did an exercise in Venice of how placetaker seminar, kind of architecture intervention in the Giardini of Venice would actually serve as a catalyst, as a generator, which will transform the entire Venice. So we start not only the Biennale site, but we serve as this, as a generator in the Biennale site to actually transform the character of Venice back to the lively city, back to the normal city, if I use this word, and not just the tourist postcard destination. I mean, if you can, what you can read here, it's that publicness actually generate these sort of spaces for informal happenings, events, and more or less intimate encounters. But what is important, and this is what I would like to kind of bring it up now, it's that the publicness is sustainable, you know. So actually the buildings which are used, I mean, it sounds like very, very basic, but buildings which are used most of the time, in my opinion, they are sustainable, you know. So if you have like a stadium which is used like 10% per year, you know, and it actually occupies a very big spot in the city, is that construction sustainable? So it means, you know, the amount of energy you spend in designing that building, then results in a 90% of time completely grayness. So unused building space becomes actually sustainable when imbued with publicness. So I would start with I would actually present the projects at the production of the office through that kind of perspective of the publicness. So basically saying, you know, that I'm not going to go really deep into architecture explanation of a project. I think that there are other sources to kind of get acquainted with that if you're interested. But I will give you like my own personal sort of a reassessment, because this is kind of, you know, you first need to build or to design, and then actually as a material practice normally, as they normally function, you know, as a reassessment, you build a sort of, I want to call it like thesis, but categories, or even you can call it like techniques of categorization. So front plaza, mezzanine, and promenades. This is what I'm gonna present. These are three terms. I'm presenting you the production of the office. And front plaza was actually the basic, together connected with the vertical hall, was actually the basic idea for the first building of the office, like as Johan put it before, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which actually celebrated the 15th anniversary this year. I mean, I'm saying this, you know, because it actually shows, you know, how old we are, you know. So we are still considered as the young office, you know, but we are not so young anymore. You know. What you see here is this stacked of semi-public spaces as a kind of like front facade, front 3D facade, in front of the very, very standard generic office slab, you know. Why we did that? Well, what a nice diagram, you know. So it's we did that, you know, because we wanted to kind of move. This is somehow duplified, you know, but basically we wanted to kind of, you know, this is a very standard organization, the Breitfuß and the slab, and if you flip it up, you actually increase the interaction in the building by making it like very, very compact. So compactness of the building itself connected to the perforation, let's say vertical perforation, and due to that like vertical perception, enabled this plaza in front of the building. Plaza, the front plaza, is a kind of space of the chamber given to the city. So it means, you know, that on that plaza there are different things happening, there are different performances, events, even like demonstrations happening, which do not only belong to the chamber, but it's kind of like a front plaza. It's kind of a space, urban space, which the chamber as an institution actually gave to the city. So this is actually what I wanted to present you, this publicness. So the brief didn't ask for that. The competition brief didn't ask for that kind of square, for that kind of space. But the way how we developed the project enabled or grafted as a sort of added value, like the horizontal square in front of the building. And what you see here, like this kind of vertical perforation, is the perforation of the vertical hall, which in a way present the public happening of the institution onto the horizontal space of the office, of the square. Front plaza actually appeared in many of our projects. So in a way, you know, you always have like a kind of a space between sort of the city and the building, which in a way becomes kind of a mediator between both kind of entities. But what is the mezzanine? The mezzanine, I think it's something while preparing the lecture, I was really keen in figuring out, how many times actually it appeared in the project. I mean, as I said, in a kind of reassessment procedure. So what is the mezzanine? The mezzanine is actually the second ground floor. And by saying the mezzanine, you actually, phenomenologically, you change the perception and the movement. If the ground floor, it's always, that you walk through, it's always like a transient space. And it's a space which is not static, but it's dynamic. The ground floor, you use it as a space where you then move up or you go through, The mezzanine, it's, I would even call it's the rest space. You go there in order to be between the ground and the upper floors. It's kind of, it actually acts as almost as a plug-in level. Where you go there, you stay there, you are there, but your perception is different than as on the ground floor because you are lifted up. I will go through several examples showing, how this concept actually doesn't depend on the scale, doesn't depend on the program, doesn't depend on the context, physical context, and not even on the budget. All these parameters which actually defines the uniqueness of the architecture project. So Butcher's Bridge is one of still my favorite projects of the office. Unfortunately, it was not built. It was a competition proposal. It's a project for a bridge on the river in the center of Ljubljana as an extension of this Plečnik's marketplace. So you have like a fish market along the river. And it's not just an extension of the marketplace, but it's also a project. I mean, the competition asked for the new bridge, which would be built on the site where Plečnik already provisioned a bridge like that. So basically, what we propose was very much connected to our interpretation of that building what you see here. And why is this building, I call it like a building, why is this project so interesting for us? Because it's a bridge, but it's not a bridge. Because it's a house on the bridge. Or actually it's a house, a temple, which happens to be a bridge. And why is this important? Again, because the bridge itself is not just a transition from A to B, but it becomes a destination in itself. So we reinterpreted that building into, so it's almost like a paraphrase of the Plečnik's building, with these three set of permeable slabs, like waffle slabs, connected with this bell kind of structure, bell slender columns, which in a way how it connects create like a very kind of structural rigid sort of object. So what you see here, you have like upper slab, like the roof, then the upper level, the mezzanine, and the lower level, which connects like the two embankments. There's a difference in two embankments. That's why we have like two different levels again. And this is a connection from upper level, from the open air marketplace, and you come to the bridge, and you're on the mezzanine. So you come to the bridge, and this is where you stay. This is where you kind of sit down and observe the river, kind of have your own time on the bridge. You go down, and here you have like the extension of the marketplace, so kind of like a functional if you want to put it like that, the functional extension of the marketplace to the bridge, like a very different space, kind of like almost an interior space on the bridge, you know. And down the level below, I mean, you have the ponton, like the sort of the spiral, the communication, the circulation of the bridge, which actually ends up down on the river as a ponton bridge to the ships or to the boats. You know. But why I'm saying this, that it's a kind of a paraphrase of the Plečniks, you know, because you have all the elements here are not the bridge elements. You have the structure, it's moved from the perimeter. You know, the circulation, it's not in the perimeter again, you know, but it's in the middle. And then you have this kind of strange sort of conditions like balconies, like balcony at the end of the bridge, so bridge where you cannot sort of, you come to the end, you cannot go down, which in a way creates this ambiguity. What is that? Is it the house or is it the bridge? It's actually, it's a destination where you come and you sort of sit down and observe the river. We sort of develop the idea of the mezzanine, as I said before, through sets of different projects, you know, with always very similar idea, to kind of graft, to kind of almost like put a virus to a project where this publicness is not really required. And this is the entrance hall of the National Gallery in Ljubljana. I mean, as you saw before, actually it's a connecting wing between the two existing buildings. It was actually, the competition brief asked for a shelter for the fountain, as presented here. This is the original of the fountain. And we developed this mezzanine as something, you know, an additional mezzanine, an additional level within the space of the gallery. The mezzanine here presented with this kind of red carpet, you know, is the place where you go also without having intention to see an exhibition. It's a place where you go and again, like sit down and you view the park on one side and the city on the other side from different perspective. And I mean, whereas, you know, when you are on the ground, you buy tickets, you know, you put like your stuff in the clock room, buy the things in the shop. Whereas here, it's a space where you can only have a coffee and you enjoy the space and the views, the space of the gallery and the views of towards the outside. This is, let's say, in the afternoon, but then in the evening, the mezzanine as the space itself becomes something as a stage, you know, like this is the space where actually the gallery gets its own events, but also events which are kind of leased to external parties, organized on that level. And why is this important? I mean, it's important, you know, because, you know, the gallery actually communicates its presence to the city, to outer world, if I put it like that, by the happenings or with the happenings on that mezzanine, by the publicness, you know, with the publicness on which happens on the mezzanine. So in a way, you know, the mezzanine as a pure architecture device transforms or tries or triggers the transformation of the National Gallery as a very, very hermetic institutions, and acts as a tool of its own communication to the city. Developed further, I mean, we developed further the idea of the mezzanine into a more or less kind of sort of a building which communicates to the world or to the city only with its mezzanine. So, and this was a project for the culture center in Maribor, so Maribor Culture Center, developed in a textile factory which got demolished, you know, due to the earthquake regulations. And what we proposed was actually a culture center with a white box, the white box of the gallery on your right-hand side, and the black box of the performing art center, developed as in a kind of wrong side of the river, to become like a trigger, to become like a catalyst of the for the further redevelopment of the area. And here, I mean, I think in this diagram it's clear enough showing what is all that about. So we have something on the ground, and then we lift it up, and by lifting the slab up, you create this different relationship between performance and spectating. So in a way, you are in the space above the river, and you see the city in a different way, and you are seen from the city in a different way. So this is, you know, the way how you approach. You enter the building. This is, you know, you're on the ground, you're on that ground floor, you enter here to the performance center, you enter to the gallery, but then you are kind of triggered to go up, and you find yourself in a completely different spatial condition, like very low, much more intimate, very kind of like, I mean, lounge would be like the wrong expression, but it's something which doesn't belong to the gallery, nor to the gallery, neither to the gallery nor to the performance center. It's a public space. It's an elevated public space from where you can actually see the city almost as a postcard. You have like the best view to the city from that particular spot. So, and then from the city, you know, the culture center would communicate not with its primary function, not with its gallery, nor with the performing arts center, but with the publicness, with its public character, with what is going on that mezzanine. So you see like the shift from also, you know, from in kind of like a semantic, if I use this word, you know, it's not communicating the culture, it's not communicating the gallery, but it's communicating like the public character of the building. Moving quickly to the sports park in Ljubljana. This is actually the biggest and still ongoing project. I mean, we won the competition for that project in 1997, and you see like after 16 years, it's still not completely finished, you know. This is an important project for the office, you know, because it's not just due to its grandeur, I mean, due to the size, but also due to a very, very complex structure, I would say. It's a very hybrid organization between two sports objects, like the sports hall and the stadium, as you see it here, the public park on the roof, and the shopping center underneath, and the parking underneath. So it's a hybrid structure, as I mentioned before, which would actually bring people to the place, to that place, also where there are no performances or events or matches or games in the two main buildings. I mean, I must say that I must mention, you know, that this was a public-private partnership project where public, sort of like the city of Ljubljana, would give the land to the retailer, who would actually build the two buildings, the stadium and the sports hall, and for that kind of he would sort of provide the space. In that case, it was something like 80,000 square meters of the shopping, retail, entertainment, in order to keep the whole spot, the whole park alive. I must just say, you know, that this is still under big question. What you see here is a photo from last year. The public partner actually built everything, and then just before the conclusion, you know, he bankrupted. You know, so it's the city is now actually really trying to acquire or to get the new one to complete the project. Going back to the mezzanine, I mean, what you see here, it's again like the city balcony. You know, both buildings are actually lifted up from the highway road, so that when you come to that very end, like here, you have like Alps on the other side as the sort of like nice view from that balcony from the mezzanine. Why was that possible? What you see here is the condition before the construction started. This used to be a gravel pit for one of the construction companies in Ljubljana. And this gravel pit actually provided this 9 meters of difference between the road level and the bottom, I mean, of the gravel pit. So, and we use this condition to kind of, as a starting point for the project development. Because what we did, in a way, we infill that gravel pit with the program as mentioned here. Well, some needs. Anyway, so basically, 2 buildings were placed there, and then I'm apologizing for these slides, but okay. So it's 2 buildings were placed at the parking got underneath, then retail, and then on top of retail comes the park. So you see that this sort of it was kind of like a Röntgen view to the entire organization. You have like the entertainment and shopping mall, which would actually keep the area alive. The floating, we kind of like joke, like female-shaped sports hall, and sunken male stadium, sunken into the park, connected very much to the red-marked shopping mall and the orange-marked like areas of the shopping surround. The green areas are actually it's the park on the roof of the shopping. It's a public park on the roof, which would then extend to the green areas around the site. You know. So you would have like a very kind of strong shopping underneath, plus 2 sports objects and the public park above, you know, which would in a way become sort of like generator of the life, of everyday life in the area. So this is partly happening. I mean, the 2 buildings like the sports hall and stadiums were finished in 2011, and we're kind of, you know, it takes time, you know, but I think that it's coming along, you know, that the life is getting slowly to the space, you know, also without having a shopping center finished, you know. So it's more, I mean, these slides I'm more showing, you know, as an sort of example how to design a very sort of demanding or complex structure, which are designed for like sports, like stadiums and sports halls, which are all dimensions and designed for the maximum capacity. So it's 17,000 people in this case, and 13,000 people for the sports hall. Which means, you know, that you need to kind of provide everything for the maximum capacity, which, as I mentioned before, actually happens 10%, I mean, maybe 5 to 10% of times in the year. So the rest, it should be like a very kind of lively areas or lively spot with the help of the park. First, the help of the park, and then hopefully, you know, when shopping and entertainment comes, would become like even more lively, you know. So this is the condition. I mean, this photo was taken probably, yeah, in September last year. First part is concluding. The second part, it's still under construction. As I mentioned before, it would be completely, I would be completely sort of, yeah, satisfied to when I see, you know, that the park as the main added value of the entire area will actually be completed. This entire area on the top, on the roof of the shopping center. I will complete this mezzanine part of the presentation with the project for the mosque. We won a competition last year in Pristina, in Kosovo, for a very sort of traditional, I mean, the competition brief really asked for a very traditional mosque in the space where the mosque is actually like that. So this is the site for the mosque. So you see, it's a completely non-monumental. You know, it's in the middle of the neighborhood on this public parking. The competition asked for the mosque for 6,000 people. I mean, these 6,000 people would actually move from that from the streets or areas in front of the existing mosque. This is a very beautiful old mosque in Pristina as the main mosque. They would actually have their own space now in the new mosque. So how to actually connect this sort of very, yeah, I would say like almost fixed regulations how to design the mosques into something which would be a mosque of the early 21st century, if I'm a little bit non-modest, you know. So we really studied the way how proportions, you know, I mean, I read a lot about, you know, how the mosque should function, how the ways, how the circulation is split between female and male population, etc., etc. And here you see that the new mosque we propose is kind of a enlargement of the old mosque. Why the mezzanine was again introduced in the project? I mean, no matter how traditional the program was, you know, the shopping and the parking was part of the brief, you know. So the shopping again would actually help not only to construct the mosque, but to kind of keep the building alive every day, you know. So you have, like, on the bottom podium you have the shopping, then it's an education, Muslim education center, and more you move up, you move to the pure religious function of the complex. What we did, again, we developed like the podium with the mezzanine which would then extend into the interior of the mosque, and then 3 belts, like very heavy, structurally heavy belts, which would then support the dome of the mosque. What you see here, and this is like I'm concluding with that part, is the front plaza, the mezzanine, and the building. I mean, and the actual building of the mosque. You know, how this actually transition space between the front plaza on the lower level, then you have the mezzanine with all the spaces of ablution and this kind of gathering spaces before you would enter the mosque, develop around the building. I mean, reference to the traditional sort of spatial concepts in the Islamic architecture were quite evident in order to kind of provide the entrance to the religious space. In this section, it's actually clear, you know, that the 4 stories parking, the shopping, and the entertainment, it's actually almost like as big or even bigger program spatially bigger program than the mosque, the religious space of the complex itself. So the twist, why the belts are twisted? I mean, kind of critically saying, you know, today, like almost like after a year when the mosque was presented to the Islamic community in Pristina, I would say that maybe the twist was somehow too exaggerated, too present, and if happens, you know, that the project will go ahead, I would sort of like tend to reduce it. But the twist was meant, you know, to kind of provide like completely different setting of the mosque or relationship of the mosque to the surrounding. So you see here, you know, it kind of really pose itself, and then provide like this different impression, different kind of experience on the mezzanine level, which becomes like the space of the gatherings in front of the mosque, in order to prepare you to go into inside, where you would see the twist as somehow kind of play with light and very massive structure above the religious ground. You know. The front plaza again becomes like the space where you come and do like very informal things like picnics or barbecuing or simply gatherings before entering the complex of the mosque with the shopping and the education center. Next, and I think that the last part of the lecture, it's I need to speed up a little. It's the third concept is the promenade. The concept of the promenade as the difference to the mezzanine. So I'm saying, you know, or I'm, you know, this category actually shows the project in connection to the circulation. So if we have like the mezzanine, it's static, is a plug-in slab. The promenade would actually show, you know, how the public circulation through the building would actually change the character, change the atmosphere of the building itself. Again, you know, there is no relationship to the program. I mean, program can be different, you know, size can be different, context can be different. The three examples I'm showing. The first one is a very small hotel, 4 townhouses being sort of converted into a boutique hotel of 16 rooms and the restaurant. But what is even more important than just that this place is designed, the hotel, it was designed in a way that it becomes a very public spot for, not only for the hotel guests, but for people or inhabitants of Ljubljana. So we're down on the street, on the river, on the promenade next to the river, very lively street. And then the hotel is actually just one of in a very tiny perpendicular street which is shown here on the slide. So the idea was, you know, how to actually get people from that main flow into that tiny street. How to actually develop like an attractor, like a promenade which was, in a way, if I exaggerate a little bit, suck that people from the street into the domain of the hotel, you know. So the way, and I think that how we actually try to do it is first with a program, positioning the restaurant on the ground and on this tiny street, then develop like a series of spaces, series of the kind of mixed hotel, outdoor, non-hotel restaurants, bar, develop like a circulation through the building, which is the same way circulation to the room, but it becomes also circulation to the public spot on this floor, which is actually the highest floor of the building. So this is the room, which actually becomes a spot for, you know, events connected to the hotel, but also connected to the, you know, party dinners or birthday parties or kind of events of people from Ljubljana, which then extends up to the terrace, and the terrace itself has become like a very, very sort of, I wouldn't call it like a trendy spot that you go there and enjoy like an evening there, or just come there in the afternoon, sit next to the pool, have like a quick swim, and enjoy, you know, a completely different perspective to the city. Something like a public promenade through the Faculty of Social Works. We tried to kind of we developed in this project for the university in the university campus in Ghent. So these are these three projects we are designing right now. I mean, they are kind of in the tender process. The student plaza, the sports hall, and the Faculty of Social Works as a kind of new entrance to the campus. So it's basically also the kind of a building, a singular architecture project which would act as a connector between the city of Ghent and the university. So I think it was like a very also smart idea in the competition to kind of use the buildings as a kind of gate, as a kind of connector between the urban life of the city and the life of the university. We actually built the three buildings like that, and especially in the Faculty of Social Works I'm presenting here, this sort of promenade was developed as a main character, also kind of like a main motif for the project. What you see on your left-hand side, it's what the competition brief asked for, and our response is what you see on your right-hand side. So instead of developing a corridor structure or a corridor organization, with kind of like a center aula of the school, and then the outdoor courtyard, we actually brought these three parameters, so these three entities together into a very compact volume with two interior atriums and no corridors. So very compact rectangular building with two atriums around which the public circulation is developed. So you come to the building also if you're not a student, also if you're not a professor, because you come to that building because you are interested in how the study of social works are actually being provided, but also because of all these events which were given in the program and which could actually happen in the domain of the building, including like the summer cinema at the top of the building. So I mean, I'm showing you these plans, you know, to in a way assure you, this is a very kind of almost like a standard organization. I mean, it's not that that classrooms would be super inventive or something like really new, but the way how the circulation goes through that, this sort of like central stripe of the building actually provides completely different experience of the space of the faculty. Why? Because you can see and you can be seen from different spots. I mean, you will see like the school life would become like a one big entity. So this is like very kind of neutral from the outside, with this kind of fiberglass lamellas which would provide shading shading for the classrooms, as well as protection of the fire escapes route around the buildings. You would be invited, literally invited by, to get into the building by when the arch is actually created by lifting up this shell, getting into under the skirt. You're in the space of the ground floor, where you have like a complete connection to the height of the building, to the upper floors. You move through the levels, throughout the levels. You're on the second floor where these special classrooms are situated, where you can actually show how music can be taught, where drama can be taught, etc., etc. Move up to the cafeteria. So cafeteria is not down on the ground floor, but it's on the upper floor, in order to get to the roof where the life of the school and the life of the city would actually start to interact with public program, which becomes part of the social life of the school. Last project of the promenade category is actually the culture center, with a very, very complicated name of European Space Technologies. It's a very kind of dubious name for a building which in a way was a substitute for the social center, of the communal center of that village of Vitanje in the remote spot of northeast Slovenia with, I don't know, like 2,000 people, Very kind of complex background. So what you see here, it's actually the first project for the living machine in the space, das Wohnrad, the project which was designed by Herman Potočnik Nodnung, an inhabitant of that village in the north of Slovenia. So this was actually done in 1926 or 1925, and was like the first sort of project how to inhabit the space. This project was a part of this year's Venice Biennale. It's a Slovenian contribution to the, let's say, architecture, modernist thinking of the 21st century, as presented by the curatorial team. But this was also the starting point, or like the base for Kubrick's Wohnrad in 2001. And this was also the starting point of the building, because we designed together with 3 other offices in Slovenia. So take into account that this building, it's a museum, it's a culture, museum, it's an exhibition space and a conference sort of center, at the same time as it houses a association of a peasant women or fishermen. It's a children's core of the village. So basically, it's really like a hybrid structure, where you would have like a conference of space technologies happening on the same place as the sort of like silver wedding anniversary of two guys from the village. How we actually, I mean, if you ask, you see that this is kind of like as people would call, like a flying saucer landing in the small village. But the way how the project actually got customized or contextualized, if you wanted, was through the promenade as the main concept of the building. So very simple. There are two cylinders which interact, which actually intersect, wrapped around with the facade, and with this intersection, all the circulation actually happens. So you stand in the front of the building, kind of getting in under this huge cantilever into inside. This is the main space where you have the kind of concrete, heavy concrete slab sort of hovering above you. This is the space where different performances can happen, including the Christmas celebrations of the village. You are on the perimeter and you move up. This is a permanent exhibition on the research of space. And you're in a kind of very ambiguous space where your gravity is actually being challenged, you know, because it's a double tilted. I mean, it's a section, diagonal section of the cylinder. I mean, these guys, I mean, it's not there are so different in the height, you know. You move up, you're in the space above where you will see again, you know, what is going on. These chambers, glazed chambers, are actually working spaces for researcher who can come here, but they're also working spaces for children from the village, you know, who sort of have like, you know, Saturday drawing lessons in the space. You know. So in order to come up to the roof, you have again like perception to the village which is completely different. Like you see like not the houses, but more like nature in the surrounding. So that then you continue that promenade through this kind of like fire escape route, which becomes kind of part of the facade, in order to get down to the ground where actually your promenade starts. So in a way, you know, the paths to the building would sort of like set the building, set that museum communal center into the village of Vitanje. To conclude the lecture, I'm too long. Shall I? Yeah, maybe. I would actually conclude with kind of antithesis. So first you do like the really public, but then, you know, at the end, you know, there are some projects, there are actually some buildings, some institutions where there are actually no public, there was actually non-publicness allowed, if I put it like that. And I'm showing you quickly two recent examples of a air traffic control center, which is almost like a military character building in the airport of Ljubljana, where you see the pentagon of air controllers kind of protected by 4 sort of like levels of protecting zone. Offices which are around that core of the building would in a way protect in case of emergency that something would happen inside. At the same time, this is 24/7 building, which means, you know, that all the spaces which are there should be done in a way that these guys working here in night shifts would also have like something of their life, you know. So that's why the building itself becomes kind of a word in itself. I mean, it's kind of like almost like a bunker which opens up in order to get light in. That the facade is done in a way that is sort of like a hybrid between parapet and brisolae, actually react in a sort of primitive parametric way to the external parameters of insulation orientation and internal parameters of the program. Meaning, you know, that when you don't have a parapet, it's because, you know, behind that it's a space where you want to kind of sit down and view to the surrounding. This logic continues into the vertical hall of the space, where like the main functions or the main activities, like the main meeting room, the small cafeteria, fitness resting area are actually created. So this becomes kind of like a interactive part of the building. You move away, and this is a rest part for people who work here, including like the very kind of basic bedrooms for controllers who can sleep on the second floor, in order to kind of work super intensively in the air control center in the middle of the building. So you develop like a very kind of complex structure in order that these guys who work here would have like as much of their kind of life while spending in the building as possible. And in the last project is actually the most intimate project we have ever done. It's a project for a very specific bachelor, like a guy. It's an apartment, a private apartment, which looks almost like a kind of unlivable space, but this is due to a very specific need of this specific non-public need of this particular guy, which actually express, that the warmest thing in that apartment, it's actually himself. So everything else should be like really cold, But you see here like a plan, like very simple, like a sleeping part on the right-hand side, and a living part. And then I actually, while preparing the lecture, I actually asked him, it's been like a year ago since he moved into the apartment, to take photos himself, to take photo, because I was interested in seeing, how this gentleman, who is a plastic and aesthetic surgeon, would actually live here in this sort of like anti-public atmosphere. And I was quite happy to receive, I was really, I wondered, he sent me 20, 30 photos. I selected a couple of them. And this is the way how non-public life of this person is actually presented. With kind of semi-empty fridge, the food which is presented like that, like some exercise devices hidden in the kind of concrete walled part of the apartment. Space which is, he would call it like a sterile, but it's not. It's just the space for him. This is how he really enjoys there. So, for instance, when I came there, for a visit, first thing, I needed to kind of put like this slippers on, No one is allowed to kind of touch the walls with the hands, because there would be prints on that, So it's really like the life for him. There is no direct light. It's always like a diffused light, which comes through these plexi shades into the building, into the apartment, and this is actually, imagine him sitting in front of the television, which is also a large computer screen, and this kind of reflection of oversized lighting above reflected on the raising floor, with no connection to the outside, with actually no connection to the public life. Thank you.
Thank you, Boštjan. Will there be questions? Comments? Thoughts?
When you talk about public and private space, I guess you talk about them in different levels. How do you manage what happens like in between? If it's all perception, right, and what is public and what is private, how do you manage that kind of creating in between space?
Well, I mean, do you think it's a gradient?
Or that's like what you think?
No, you see, I mean, I think that this presentation actually tried to show that that I really don't like the expression semi-public, you know, which would be something between public and private, you know. It's either you kind of infuse almost like a virus the publicness into the semi-public domain of the building, well, let's say the museums or the galleries and so on, or provide something which is, you know, as in that case, which is a very specific case of that apartment, which becomes like super intimate. I mean, it's you know, the intimacy, it's here, it's not just because you're behind the wall. The intimacy is, you know, that, and I'm making this intimacy very public now, is that the way how the space is designed, I mean, from the spatial concept to the lighting and choice of the material, it's intimate. It's actually, it comes from deep discussions with the guy, you know, his kind of, you know, viewing of what the beauty is, viewing of the exterior world and so on. So it's, I would say that what we try to do is to kind of diminish the sort of like the filtering or the buffering between the intimate or non-public and public.
I guess I can have a follow-up question. How do you manage what happens in these spaces? Like, and if someone can just walk up to the mezzanine level, I mean, how do you make sure that, I mean, you try to control what's happening there, or are you just like, okay, this script is just let the script run? Like, say, for example, just the sculpture, or the playground sculpture.
Yeah.
I mean, there's kids playing there in the daytime. I mean, you encourage what happens afterwards at night?
I mean, in the night the kids are not playing because they're sleeping. No, but I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's actually the question of control and surveillance. It's how you actually provide the publicness if you are kind of controlled, you know, or if your access is controlled. You know. I mean, in the gallery, it's an interesting example. It's that you actually need to buy the ticket to get to the upper floor, but you don't buy the ticket to get to the mezzanine. So it means, you know, that basically the way how the circulation is taught, it needs to kind of include in the, let's say, conceptualizing of the project, also, you know, the question of control, you know. So, for instance, also in this culture center I showed, you know, I mean, you will always go up to that public mezzanine, but you will not enter the gallery space or the performance space without having a ticket, you know. So it's, I mean, there are different, I would say, there are different ways of doing things, of providing that kind of control, non-control. But of course, you know, you have to take into account that as soon as you enter the building, you are somehow surveyed, you know. But you're surveyed on a public square as well, you know.
Well, so they call it added value. Is that also what you argue is the client?
This is a good question. Yeah, this is actually a very good question, you know, because it's sometimes we even don't want to talk about that too much at the beginning, you know, because it would be, you know, it would be like saying, okay, so why to build a mezzanine? Because we don't do it, because we don't need it, because it's not part of the competition brief, you know. We don't need the mezzanine in order that the gallery will function, you know. So we somehow we kind of like try to sort of bring it between the lines, you know, to the client, you know. And then in some cases, like for example, for the sports center, the meaning of the park on the roof of the shopping was actually the most important part of the project, which in a way also convinced, you know, the city planners, you know, the committee and the jury, you know, to kind of go ahead with that, you know, because it's a kind of like a public space which, you know, the city, the mayor, the committees use also in order to kind of get people drawn into the project. So it's the way, I mean, the way of communicating this added value needs to be sort of thought from case to case.
But how do you, I was actually intrigued, and I think it works super convincingly with some of the projects. And the others, like the hotel, it seems to be more a, more, you know, it seems to be that's also,
yeah, kind of like
a, to come up with it.
Yeah.
But what intrigues me, a couple of things. I find it particularly impressive because it seems to be an enormously, it seems to be a very well considered strategy that somehow is an engine for developing quite a few of the projects. And there I'm curious in the first case, in the first place, did that happen sort of per chance? Did that happen in a cumulative fashion over the years? Or did it really start out as a conscious sort of approach to the first project, Chamber of Commerce and
I think it was kind of parallel. It's I would say that this happens maybe as a by effect or as a post effect due to the fact, you know, that we were very much working in one city. And that because, you know, we had like we won competitions and we had commissions for not for master planning but for singular architecture buildings, and we wanted to see, and this is actually going back to the very beginning, to the chamber and to the gallery, how we can actually influence a social structure or of like urban structure of the city with these singular architecture projects. So it means, you know, how you actually change the perception, how you actually enable like a different kind of urban experience. And since we are not doing like a big master plans, we say, okay, let's try to develop a kind of a technique where you would sort of enhance that or embody that kind of tendency within the object, within the project itself. And you know, this was kind of running parallel, so it was kind of how do you call it, a rhizomatic structure. So we developed this, we test it, and then go back and change it, you know. So, I mean, it was not a theoretical statement at the beginning, and then we proved that in the practice, but actually develop it together with a number of projects. Yeah.
Category of Mezzanine.
Yeah.
Because there was two cases, one for a couple of them where it was attached to an existing building, and another one more independent, like a bridge one.
Yeah.
But and to follow up also on Johan's question, you were talking about a certain technique developed, but maybe could you focus or elaborate a little bit more on the design characteristics of it, on the Mezzanine, for example. What are characteristics?
I mean, yeah, what are the characteristics of the mezzanine? I mean, as I mentioned before, the mezzanine, it's always a space between the ground floor and the first floor. So in a way, it's a plug-in level. So it means, you know, that you would be so high that you would experience the immediate surroundings in a different way. So your perception would be different because of, I mean, it's very simple because you move higher, you know. The second thing of the mezzanine, it's that it's static. I mean, that actually when you go there, you know, it should become a destination in itself. So in a way, you have to kind of decide to go to the mezzanine. It's not, it shouldn't become like a part of the, or it's not necessarily a part of the circulation through the building. That's why we try. I mean, as I show in the gallery, the bridge, more or less the examples, more or less in the early examples I presented. It's basically, it's a decision that you would kind of brought into the building, a kind of virus, if I exaggerate. And the virus is this plug-in slab. So it's something which is added to the actual structure of the building.
I think it's a very good observation, because and I think it's particularly interesting. Namely, you need circulation in order to moving people around circulation. So basically, you move people into the building, you're going to extend the circulation system. So basically, that's what you do with the gardens. That's what you do with the promenade.
Yeah.
So the keenness of observation to me is also, of course, that the whole setup becomes particularly interesting the moment that meets with an architectural element. So it's not merely an infrastructural device infesting the interior space, but it's actually somehow negotiation or somehow the sort of meeting ground of those two. And it seems to me that the building maybe returns something to what you call, to the public, in terms of publicness, but it's also the other way around. So basically there's the city returning something to the architecture.
Yeah, I think this is a very good point. It's actually, because I mean, usually we say, okay, that the ground floor becomes an extension of the urban space into the building. I would claim no, that the ground floor is actually, it's a part of the building. I mean, you don't kind of put your clothes outside, you put your clothes in the cloakroom inside of the building. But the mezzanine becomes an extension of the urban space, It's I think that conceptually, I find this interesting, because it's a space, if I exaggerate a little bit, which the building itself or a building itself doesn't really need, But it's a kind of a device which, as you put it, negotiate with an urban space outside of the building. And I'm sure that, I mean, if you try to think back to the history days, I mean, it's not like we are not inventing like a new water. There are several examples which can be sort of described with this category. And it's funny, because when we started, let's say after 5 years of, after the setting up of the office, we had like enough projects that we kind of categorized them with so-called formulas. So we kind of invented the expression formula New Ljubljana, which means, that basically, I mean, the main topic was, that you transform the city with singular architecture projects, with architecture concepts, that the architecture concepts would actually search and find their place in the city. So, and then, I mean, it was like, like vertical hall was one of the concepts, or cinematic structure. I mean, it was always connected with the way, how a particular architecture element is, like structure, and cinematic as how you would experience that. So it's the way, I mean, how I relate to an architecture element. So, and then when we actually, after certain 10 or 12 years of the practice, we actually reassess again, what we've been doing. Since, I mean, I'm saying this, because we are not really keen on developing a certain architecture style. I mean, our buildings are not recognizable as one, formal slash visual slash volumetric expression, which would be like similar. But it's more like, you know, that they can be connected with, you know, these simple ideas of mezzanine, front plaza, how they're grounded on the floor, you know, how you move through the building. It's something which I find myself much more interesting, at least for me, you know, than sort of developing a kind of very strong formal language. I'm not saying that this is better or worse, it's just kind of part of different interests.
How did the inhabitants in the village take to the
you would not believe, you know, they are so proud, you know, because they have like, I don't know, so many visitors coming there, you know, the village really flourishing of that. And even, you know, all this, but what is more interesting, you know, you have like the, you know, these associations of women, peasant women, which, or, you know, like fishermen, or which before they have like a big building in the middle of the village, you know, they gather there, and they gather in that building together with kind of exhibition on the tilted floor of the space technologies. I mean, it's kind of almost like a bizarre situation. But of course, you know, they have like the more money comes to the village, you know, they have like restaurants which are better, kind of become like a bigger and bigger, you know. They have, I don't know, the AA is organizing a summer school in the building, you know. So it's, I mean, I would not call it like the Bilbao effect, but it's a Vitanje effect, you know.